Barely 2 hours after I buried my 21-year husband, a decorated retired Army colonel, laid to rest with full national honors, my mother-in-law leaned into my ear at his graveside and whispered a sentence that shattered every part of the life we'd built, while I stood frozen, clutching his folded American flag, still reeling from burying the man I love. She didn't offer sympathy, didn't shed a single tear. She simply smiled and told me our family home, our lifelong business, every single thing my husband and I spent decades building, now belonged solely to her bloodline. In that cold, quiet cemetery moment, my grief didn't get to come first. Greed did, and what followed was a month-long battle no one thought I could win, least of all her. The entire Arlington National Cemetery was hushed that gray afternoon, save for the soft rustle of wind through ancient oak trees and the quiet shuffle of polished dress shoes on manicured grass. Colonel Daniel Harper, my husband of 21 years, had just been laid to rest with a dignity most people never earn in a lifetime. The honor guard had folded the American flag with painstaking, sacred precision, every crease deliberate, every fold a tribute to his decades of military service. A young soldier with a shaky, cracking voice handed it to me with both hands, uttering the words every military spouse both cherishes and dreads, on behalf of a grateful nation. I didn't cry, I didn't speak, I only nodded, because Daniel would have hated a scene. He was the kind of man who washed his coffee mug every single night before bed, who shined his dress shoes religiously even years after retiring from the military, who always said you could judge a person's true character by how they treated service workers, janitors, and people society overlooked. Quiet, disciplined, loyal to a fault. That was my Daniel. And in that moment, staring at his fresh grave, I tried to hold on to his calm instead of drowning in my sorrow. Then Eleanor Harper stepped beside me, dressed in pristine navy blue and pearls, not a tear staining her flawless composure. She glanced at the sacred folded flag in my arms, not like a tribute to her son's legacy, but like a crumpled receipt she planned to discard. Softly, coldly, she said my name. Margaret, we need to be practical now. For a split second, I stupidly thought she meant funeral bills, out-of-town family arrangements, or the endless logistical chaos that follows a funeral. I had no idea her version of practical was stealing my entire life out from under me. She leaned in closer, her voice low enough that no one else within earshot could hear the cruel words that gutted me. That house belongs to my family now. So does the business. Daniel would have wanted his bloodline protected. I stared numbly at a loose thread hanging off her coat, my mind screaming in disbelief. 21 years of marriage, 21 years of shared mornings, shared struggles, shared dreams, shared memories. I was his wife, his partner, his family, not some temporary guest in his life. I could have yelled, I could have argued, I could have reminded every grieving person standing nearby exactly how wrong she was. But I didn't. I just tightened my grip on the flag and spoke two steady, defiant words. Not today, Eleanor. Her smile in response was sharp and victorious, like she'd just confirmed every petty assumption she'd ever held about me. That I was weak, that I was grieving too deeply to fight, that I would roll over and let her take everything. And in that moment, standing over my husband's grave, I let her believe it. Little did she know, I wasn't surrendering. I was biding my time. When I pulled into our empty Fairfax home later that day, every corner screamed his absence. Daniel's reading glasses still rested on the arm of his favorite worn recliner. His half-finished crossword puzzle sat untouched on the kitchen table, next to a mug of cold coffee I couldn't bring myself to pour out. The house felt far too big, far too quiet. Every ordinary detail a painful reminder that he was never coming home. For hours, I just wandered silently through the rooms we'd built our life in, drowning in grief no one else could see. At exactly 7:15 that evening, my attorney Michael Ross showed up at my door with a leather folder and a heavy, worried expression. He sat across from me at that same kitchen table, his tone gentle but firm. Margaret, Eleanor has already contacted probate counsel. She's moving fast. I let out one dry, hollow laugh. Of course she was. She'd spent decades waiting for a chance to claim her son's life as her own, and my husband's funeral was just the opening she'd needed. Michael slid the folder across the table, laying out all my legal options. You have every right to fight this. The house, Harper Precision, all the estate accounts, none of this is simple. But you are not powerless. I stared blankly at Daniel's empty chair, at the faint indentation where he'd sat every night for years, and said the words that made my lawyer blink twice in pure shock. Let her have it. For several long, tense seconds, Michael didn't speak. He just stared at me, waiting for for me to backtrack, waiting for grief to make me take back my words. Finally, he leaned back, rubbing his forehead in exhaustion. Margaret, grief makes people do strange things. If you need more time, we can wait to make any decisions. I shook my head, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. I've already made one. He lifted his brows, confused. You want to surrender everything. I turned my gaze toward Daniel's silent recliner, the muted local news flickering on the television. Neither of us cared about anymore. I didn't say surrender. I said I refused to fight the ugly, bitter war Eleanor wants me to fight. Michael slowly closed the folder, his tone quiet and bewildered. I've handled probate cases for 24 years. I've never seen someone this calm after losing their husband and facing an immediate family lawsuit. I looked him straight in the eye and told him the unvarnished truth. I'm not calm at all. The second he walked out my front door, I crumbled. I stumbled into Daniel's closet, pressed my face into his well-worn army jacket, and sank to the hardwood floor, crying until my knees ached and my throat was raw. Those tears weren't strategic. They weren't for a court case or a fight. They were just for him, for the husband I'd lost, for the life we'd just lost, for the quiet happiness no one would ever understand. The next Sunday, I walked into our Fairfax church alone for the first time in 22 years. For decades, Daniel had always insisted we arrive 15 minutes early, always saying running late was disrespectful to the community and the faith he held close. That morning, I parked my car in the empty spot where his truck always sat, walked in alone and endured the well-meaning hugs and whispered prayers that only made my loneliness worse. Mrs. Collins squeezed me so tight I could barely breathe, telling me she prayed for me daily. I thanked her softly, but her kindness couldn't fix the gaping hole in my chest. And then the whispers started. Quiet, cutting, gossipy whispers that snaked through the pews and the parking lot before the service even ended. Did you hear Eleanor hired lawyers to take the company? Is she really letting her take the house? After 21 years of marriage, she's just giving up everything. Small town Northern Virginia gossip spread like wildfire. Everyone quick to judge my silence as weakness, my patience as defeat. I smiled politely and kept walking, because none of them knew the full story. None of them knew I wasn't giving up. I was waiting. After church, Daniel's oldest and closest army friend Frank Donovan caught up to me in the parking lot. 6'3", broad, shouldered like an old oak tree, perpetually wearing his veteran's cap. He'd served alongside Daniel for 18 years. He crossed his arms, his expression stern and confused. Margaret, talk to me. What's going on? Dan would have fought for this. He would have prepared. I smiled a sad, knowing smile and shook my head. For a long moment, Frank stood silent, processing my quiet resolve, before he finally nodded. For the first time, someone understood I wasn't failing Daniel. I was honoring him in a way no one else could see. Eleanor wasted zero time spinning her false narrative to the world. Just 3 days after the funeral, she hosted half the Harper family for an expensive lunch at the local upscale pub. And by sunset, every distant cousin, every estranged relative, every casual acquaintance had heard her version of the truth. Margaret knows she can't win. She's finally doing the decent thing. My son built that business, and it belongs to his blood family. After 21 years as Daniel's wife, after building his home and his business alongside him, I was no longer considered family. I was just an outsider standing in the way of her greed. Days blurred into weeks of quiet judgment and lonely nights. My kind neighbor Linda showed up at my door with a warm peach cobbler, her voice soft and gentle as she set it on my counter. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but are you okay? I laughed a quiet, broken laugh and told her the truth no one else believed. I'm not okay. She squeezed my hand, and we stood in my silent kitchen for minutes without speaking. Sometimes silence is kinder than any empty advice anyone could offer. A week later, Michael called with a sharp, urgent update. The first probate conference is next Tuesday. I need to know now. Are you still planning to let Eleanor take everything? I need clarity before we step foot in that courtroom. I glanced out my back window at Daniel's dark, untouched workshop, at his toolbox sitting exactly where he'd left it the day he died. My answer didn't waver. I haven't changed my mind. Michael sighed heavily over the phone, his tone weary. I hope your husband left you something more than courage. Margaret. After I hung up, I whispered to the empty kitchen, the words only the walls could hear. So do I. No one knew how unsure I truly was. Every single night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, torturing myself with doubt. Was I honoring Daniel's memory with my silence, or was I making the worst mistake of my entire life, letting a bitter, greedy woman destroy everything he'd worked for? By October, the entire town had already written me off. No one asked if I planned plan to fight anymore. They'd already decided I was weak, defeated, broken. Every trip to the grocery store, every prescription pickup, every quick errand was met with the same sympathetic, pitying smiles. Everyone felt sorry for me. No one trusted me. One quiet Monday morning, Michael drove me to Harper Precision Manufacturing, the small, honest business Daniel had built from the ground up in Alexandria. After retiring from the military, he'd asked me to stay on to handle payroll and employee benefits while he ran the shop day to day. We didn't build glamorous weapons or make making profits. We repaired precision hydraulic systems for fire departments, emergency rescue teams, utility companies, and federal contractors. Equipment that saved lives. Daniel always said there was more honor in fixing what helps people than chasing fame or fortune. Stepping through the shop doors, the familiar smell of machine oil and fresh brewed coffee wrapped around me like a hug. Nothing had changed. Every machine sat in its place. Every workbench was tidy. Every detail exactly as Daniel had left it. Production manager Rick hurried over, his face tight with worry. Mrs. Harper, everyone's been asking, is it true? Is Eleanor taking over the company? Several employees stopped working entirely, all eyes locked on me, waiting for my answer. These weren't just staff. Most had worked with Daniel for 20 years or more. Many were veterans or children of former employees. Their mortgages, their retirement plans, their kids' college tuition all depended on this small family business. I took a slow, shaky breath and gave them the only honest answer I had. The probate case is still ongoing. I honestly don't know yet. It wasn't the reassurance they wanted, but it was the truth. Later, Rick walked me through the shop, stopping at an old CNC milling machine Daniel had driven all the way to Ohio to inspect and buy years prior. He laughed softly, recalling how Daniel had spent 6 hours negotiating over a mere $15,000. Not because he was cheap, but because he refused to waste hard-earned money that paid his employees' salaries. For the first time since the funeral, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that eased the tightness in my chest. In that moment, surrounded by Daniel's legacy, I felt a flicker of hope I'd lost for weeks. But the peace didn't last long. When I pulled back into my driveway that evening, I froze. Eleanor's SUV was parked directly across the street, and she stood on my lawn with a real estate agent, laser measuring my porch, my driveway, the flower beds Daniel had planted by hand after retirement. They were mapping out my house, my home, like it was already theirs to take and remodel. I pulled straight into the garage and stayed silent, refusing to give her the reaction she craved. Minutes later, Linda banged on my door, furious on my behalf. She's telling the realtor she's remodeling your kitchen before Christmas. She's already planning to move in before Thanksgiving. I stared out the window at Eleanor's retreating figure, my voice calm despite the rage simmering beneath my skin. Linda stared at me in disbelief. Why aren't you angry? Why aren't you stopping her? I finally told her the truth I'd been holding onto for months, because that's exactly what everyone expects me to do. I'm not going to play her game. From that night on, I stopped wasting energy on arguments, gossip, or petty fights. Every evening after dinner, I unlocked Daniel's workshop and sat at his worn wooden workbench. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't wallow. I organized his military journals, his maintenance logs, his business binders, his tax folders, every labeled envelope and file he'd meticulously sorted over the years, an old army habit he'd never broken. I wasn't searching for proof or leverage. I just wanted to understand every piece of the quiet, honorable life we'd built together. Night after night, I sorted papers until midnight. Old country music playing softly on his vintage radio, uncovering tiny, ordinary pieces of my husband, handwritten reminders to call Rick, renew insurance, order machine parts, small, mundane notes that made me miss him more than any grand gesture ever could. Then, one quiet Thursday evening, everything changed. As I flipped through an old green binder, a sealed white envelope slipped out and fluttered to the floor. It had my name written across the front in Daniel's unmistakable, neat handwriting. No return address, no extra words, just my name. My hands instantly went shaky. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding. I knew this wasn't just a note. This was something important, something he'd hidden for me, For this exact moment, I didn't open it that night. I'd learned long ago that big, life-altering decisions never end well when you're exhausted and grieving after midnight. I slid the envelope safely back into the binder, closed it tight, and carried it inside, resolving to wait for a clear mind. The next morning, I made my usual coffee in Daniel's favorite navy blue mug, a quiet, comforting habit I'd clung to since his death. Outside, the maple tree he'd always complained about raking dropped orange leaves across the driveway, and I smiled at the memory of him grumbling about yard work before spending his entire afternoon tending to it anyway. Those small, ordinary moments still caught me off guard, sharp and sweet and heartbreaking all at once. A few days later, Linda banged on my door before sunrise, her voice equal parts annoyed and stunned. "You need to come outside right now." I stepped onto my porch to find Eleanor standing in my backyard with two contractors, a clipboard and laser tape in hand, measuring every inch of Daniel's hand-built vegetable garden, the raised beds he'd spent his first retirement summer constructing from scratch. "These gardens are too hard to maintain," Eleanor announced dismissively, not even bothering to look at me. "I'm removing all of this. I prefer open landscaping." She was visibly disappointed. When I didn't argue, didn't fight, didn't give her the emotional reaction she wanted, she'd come ready for a battle, and I'd refuse to fight it. By week's end, neighborhood rumors were swirling again. Eleanor had already ordered brand new living room furniture, bragging to everyone she'd be moved into my house before Thanksgiving. Linda called me, utterly confused by my calm demeanor. "Why are you so peaceful through all of this?" I stared out my kitchen window, my voice steady and sure. "I'm not peaceful. I'm just done wasting energy on controlling what other people lie about or plan for. Their plans don't matter, not in the end." Saturday brought an unexpected, sweet surprise. 3 long-time Harper Precision employees showed up at my door with Texas donuts, Rick leading the group, their faces kind and worried. "We just wanted to check on you," Rick said awkwardly. I laughed for the second time in weeks, letting the simple joy of their kindness settle over me. We sat around my kitchen table for an hour, talking about everything but the probate battle, football, grocery prices, aching knees, the new coffee machine at the shop. It felt wonderfully ordinary, a rare slice of normalcy in my chaotic grief. But the calm didn't last. Finally, Rick cleared his throat, his tone turning serious. "Eleanor visited the shop yesterday. She introduced herself as the new future owner." My stomach dropped instantly. "She asked us for a full list of all employees over 60. She said younger workers are cheaper to keep on staff." The kitchen went dead silent. These were the people Daniel had spent decades protecting, prioritizing loyalty and hard work over profit. Machinist Carl folded his hands, his voice tight with frustration. "We don't care who owns the company, Margaret, we only care who leads it." Those words stuck with me long after they left. Leadership, not power, not authority, not greed. That's what Daniel had always stood for. That's what he'd built his entire legacy on. That night, I pulled the green binder back out and traced my fingers over Daniel's handwriting on the sealed envelope. "Margaret, open this when the time feels right." I took a deep, steady breath, and I broke the seal. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter, long, heartfelt, and nothing like the quiet, reserved man I'd known for 21 years. Daniel never did speeches. He never talked about his feelings. He fixed the broken fences, fixed the broken machines, fixed the problems with quiet action. But this letter was different. The first line alone stole my breath. "My darling Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And knowing my mother, she's already making your life far harder than it needs to be. Despite everything." I laughed, a wet, shaky laugh, in my empty house. Even in death, he was telling me jokes. He wrote of small, ordinary things first, reminding me to change the furnace filter every fall, because I always forgot, telling me never to replace his beat-up old pickup truck, that it still had 100,000 miles left in it. Then his handwriting turned sharp, serious, military, precise. "You know me well enough to know I never walked into any operation without a fully prepared exit plan. Business is no different." I leaned forward, my heart racing. Even after 12 years of retirement, he still thought like a colonel, always planning ahead, always protecting what mattered most. The next paragraph changed everything. "Michael knows where the important papers are. If anything feels wrong, ask him to check the blue estate binder, not the green one." A blue binder. I'd spent 2 weeks organizing every file in Daniel's workshop and never once thought to check the dusty 3-ring binder tucked on the bottom shelf under old tax boxes. I raced out to the workshop, pulled it free, and flipped it open. Inside were years of hidden trust documents, corporate records, legal filings dating back 8 years, all meticulously meticulously organized, all signed, all officially recorded. A yellow sticky note stuck to the top page read simply, Michael, review every 5 years. I called my lawyer immediately. 20 minutes later, Michael was sitting at my dining room table, spreading the blue binder's contents across the wood surface. The only sounds in the room were the ticking of the hallway grandfather clock and the quiet turn of pages. Minute after minute passed, and Michael's expression shifted from confusion to curiosity to pure, stunned disbelief. His fingers actually trembled when he reached the final page. He pulled off his glasses and stared straight at me, his voice barely a whisper. Margaret, Daniel didn't hide anything. He documented every single thing exactly as he should have. I leaned forward, desperate for answers. What does that mean? Michael tapped the binder gently, his tone slow and deliberate. It means Harper Precision may not belong to Daniel's probate estate at all. And if I'm reading this correctly, your house isn't part of the estate either. For a long, stunned moment, we sat in total silence, while a school bus rumbled past my house and a neighbor's lawnmower hummed in the distance. The world kept turning, oblivious to the miracle sitting on my dining room table. Eleanor had spent an entire month fighting, lying, bullying, and grieving me out of a life she never had any legal right to claim. She'd been waging a war over nothing. Michael spent the rest of the night verifying every document, cross-checking county records, validating signatures and filings. By dawn, he confirmed it all was 100% legitimate, legally binding, and officially recorded. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope, raw, fragile, dangerous hope. Hope that Daniel had been protecting me all along, even when I couldn't see it. Hope that all my quiet patience hadn't been weakness. It had been faith in the man I loved. The final probate hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a cold, crisp Tuesday morning at the Fairfax County Courthouse. I barely slept a wink the night before. It wasn't Eleanor I was afraid of. It was the hope itself. After weeks of believing I'd lost everything, believing my husband's legacy would be stolen, I suddenly had everything to gain. And nothing hurts worse than falling for false hope. I made scrambled eggs at 6:30, but couldn't eat a bite. My coffee went cold on my plate while I stared at the wall, processing the life-altering truth Daniel had hidden for me. When I arrived at the courthouse, the hallway outside the probate courtroom was packed. Neighbors, Daniel's veteran friends, half the staff from Harper Precision, even my neighbor Linda showed up, ready to support me. Everyone expected a brutal, dragged-out legal battle. Everyone expected me to lose. Eleanor arrived looking polished and triumphant, dressed in a designer cream suit and pearls, like she was attending an award ceremony instead of a court hearing to steal a grieving woman's home and business. Her lawyer had stacks of perfectly organized folders, ready to argue for bloodline and legacy and family ownership. Before the hearing started, Eleanor walked over to me with a fake, pitying smile. I hope there are no hard feelings, Margaret. This is just business. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice calm and unwavering. This stopped being business the day we buried your son. Her smile flickered, but she brushed it off, confident she'd already won. Judge Helen Whitaker took her seat promptly at 9 a.m. after formal court proceedings began. Eleanor's lawyer delivered a polished, powerful argument, waxing poetic about family bloodlines, generational legacy, and the right of a mother to claim her son's assets. The entire room leaned in, convinced his well-crafted speech would seal Eleanor's victory. Then Michael stood to speak. His entire opening statement lasted less than 2 minutes. We have no objection to the petition as it relates to assets legally belonging to the probate estate. Confused murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The judge looked up in surprise. Eleanor's lawyer smiled smugly. Certain we'd surrendered. Certain I'd finally folded under pressure. The hearing proceeded. One document after another slid across the table for me to sign. I signed every page without hesitation, my hand steady. From the corner of my eye, I watched Eleanor lean back in her chair, completely relaxed, triumphant, convinced she'd already won everything she'd come for. The crowd whispered that I'd given up, that I'd lost, that her greed had finally broken me. When the final signature was complete, the judge gathered all the documents and read through them slowly, methodically. The room went dead silent. No one moved, no one breathed, waiting for the final ruling that would hand my home and business to Eleanor. But instead of announcing her decision, Judge Whitaker looked up at Eleanor's lawyer, her tone sharp and deliberate. Counselor, before I enter a final order, I have one question. Did you verify whether every asset listed in your petition is actually part of Colonel Harper's probate estate? The lawyer answered instantly, confident and unhesitating. Yes, Your Honor. The judge tilted her head had, her gaze steady and unyielding. Are you certain? For the first time all morning, the lawyer hesitated. He glanced at Eleanor, who nodded firmly, urging him to stand his ground. Yes, Your Honor. Interesting. The judge opened a separate sealed folder and flipped through the official, recorded documents Daniel had filed years prior. Were you aware that Harper Precision Manufacturing was transferred into the Harper Legacy Trust in June of 2018? And were you also aware that the personal residence on Willow Creek Drive was conveyed into that exact same trust during the same legal transaction? The courtroom exploded into stunned silence. The lawyer's face went white. He fumbled wildly through his binders, searching frantically for any record of the trust, but there was nothing. Eleanor leaned forward, panicked and confused. What is she talking about? Michael stood calmly, stepping forward to hand certified county records to the court clerk. These documents were officially recorded with Fairfax County in 2018. They are public record, legally binding, and fully executed. The judge confirmed the records matched perfectly. The crowd gasped. Rick's eyes went wide. Linda covered her mouth in shock. Frank Donovan stared in pure disbelief. Eleanor's smug, triumphant smile vanished completely, replaced with raw, unfiltered fear. For the first time since the funeral, she looked terrified. She looked at her lawyer, at the judge, at me, and realized she'd lost everything she'd fought so hard to steal. The judge turned to the packed courtroom and ordered Michael to explain the Harper Legacy Trust for the official record. Michael laid out Daniel's perfect, years-long plan for everyone to hear. The trust had 3 equal trustees: me, Rick Coleman, the loyal production manager who'd worked alongside Daniel for decades, and the Northern Virginia Veterans Community Foundation. No single person could sell, dissolve, or relocate the business. No one could make major changes without unanimous approval from all 3 trustees. Then Michael revealed Daniel's non-negotiable rules built into the trust. The business must stay in Northern Virginia permanently, must maintain its veteran hiring program Daniel was so proud of, and must retain at least 80% of its full-time staff through any transition. The entire room exhaled in relief. Every employee's job was safe. The business Daniel built to save lives and support his community was protected forever. But Daniel's kindness didn't end there. Michael revealed one final detail that left everyone stunned. The trust included a one-time $50,000 distribution for Eleanor, paired with a private personal letter from Daniel explaining his choice. The judge refused to read the private letter aloud out of respect for Daniel's final wishes, but she acknowledged its existence, confirming Daniel had cared enough to provide for his mother even after anticipating her greed and cruelty. In one final, definitive ruling, the judge struck down Eleanor's entire petition. The claims seeking ownership of Harper Precision Manufacturing and the Willow Creek Drive residence are denied. These assets are not part of the probate estate, and this court cannot distribute property not legally owned by the deceased. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The war was over. I'd won, not with anger or bitterness, but with my husband's quiet, brilliant, unshakable foresight. After the hearing, Eleanor had nothing left to say. Reporters swarmed her for comments, but she stayed silent, defeated and humbled. When they turned to me and asked how I felt, I answered honestly, relieved. I think my husband would be happy. When asked about Eleanor, I said only that I hoped she could find peace. It wasn't the vengeful answer anyone expected, but it was the truth I'd found in my grief. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to heal. I stepped into my role as co-trustee of Harper Precision, working alongside Rick to uphold Daniel's legacy. We expanded the veteran apprenticeship program, hired more returning service members, and gave employees the freedom to share ideas and grow the business. The shop came alive again, filled with hope and purpose, no longer shadowed by fear of ruin. Shortly before Memorial Day, I received a handwritten letter from Eleanor. No lawyers, no demands, no excuses, just a simple, sincere apology. I spent so long trying to hold onto what Daniel owned that I forgot to appreciate who he was. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I folded the letter and placed it in Daniel's blue trust binder, a quiet reminder that some apologies don't erase the past, but they free you from carrying bitterness into the future. On Memorial Day morning, I returned to Arlington National Cemetery with fresh white roses for Daniel's grave. Standing among the endless rows of marble headstones, I finally understood the full truth of his legacy. He hadn't spent years building trust documents and legal safeguards to protect money or property. He'd done it to protect people. Me, his loyal employees, the veteran community he loved, the neighborhood and town that had supported him. The house was never just a house. The business was never just a business. They were safe havens for the people people he cared about most. His greatest legacy wasn't wealth or assets. It was the lives he stabilized, the jobs he protected, the kindness he embedded into every part of the world he built. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need victory. I had peace, the greatest inheritance my brave, thoughtful, forever loving husband could ever leave me. This story proves one timeless truth. Greed rushes in to take what it thinks it's owed, but quiet integrity, patience and love always win in the end. Daniel didn't fight dirty. He planned wisely, he loved fiercely, and he protected his people long after he was gone. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if your in-law tried to steal your entire life hours after your spouse's funeral? Would you have fought immediately or trusted patience like Margaret did? If you love this emotional, twist-filled story of loyalty, legacy, and quiet justice, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on all notification bells so you never miss our next gripping real lifestyle story. Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below, and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that good people always win in the end.